chocolatiest brownies. We're gonna fit this much chocolate in this size pan. Stick around. So today we're gonna be making chocolate brownies. I absolutely love a good brownie. I got this recipe, gosh, it has to be 15 years ago from someone who I was working with at the time. She was a pastry chef, really awesome, just an excellent chef. And she had this recipe, and every time you bite into this brownie, you get another burst of chocolate. So it has, not only is it made with dark chocolate, it also has in it chips, dark and milk chocolate. So every time you bite into it, you just get this blast of chocolate, and they are just so out of this world. You are gonna love this. So to get started, we're gonna actually create a ganache with some of the ingredients. So I have here 6 ounces of corn syrup. If you want this to come out of your measuring device easier, you can always spray it with some cooking spray. As long as you're going to do it right away, it'll just fall right out of there. To that, I'm going to add 19 ounces of sugar. I'm going to add 9 ounces of butter. And I'm going to add 4 ounces of water. So now this is going to go on the stove, and it's just going to come to a low boil. I certainly don't want to cook this sugar too long. I don't want it to become caramelized. I just want to get it warm and bubbling. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put it on the stove. So while that cooks and comes up to temperature, I am going to do a couple things. First is, now in this is 13.5 ounces of flour. And in this flour, I put a half teaspoon of baking soda and a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. It doesn't need to be, there doesn't need to be a lot of leavening in this. Brownies are normally very dense. I'm just gonna whisk this dry though, and I'm gonna whisk into it a half teaspoon of kosher salt. And I'm doing this because I want to make sure there's no clumps. Now you could, if you wanted to, sift your ingredients, but you don't have to in this recipe. If you just want to whisk those ingredients, that's fine. Now it's starting to bubble. I can hear it bubbling, so I'm going to give it a stir. The butter's still got to melt, but I don't want it to sit in one place. If you let it sit in one place, it can wind up burning or at least caramelizing the sugar in that one area, and you don't want that to happen. So I'm going to turn it down just a touch so it's not blasting here, and we're going to let it go. I want it to come to a boil though. So I'm going to crack my eggs, 6 eggs in this recipe. And it helps to crack your eggs beforehand. You know, you can crack them, of course, right into the thing that you're making, but if you crack them in a bowl ahead of time, you can always fish out shells or you know, I just cracked it, and as I cracked it, a shell fell off to the side. It's easier to fish shells off and out of this bowl than it is your entire, you know, thing that you're mixing together with all your flour and sugar. And sometimes it's warm or hot, and you're trying to fish shells out of there, and it's just a pain. So 6 eggs. And now I'm creating like I said, a ganache here. So I want to get a bigger bowl than what I had the chips in. This was just to show you what it looked like. And I'm going to pour that boiling liquid on top of this and let it sit. Starting to melt here, getting this butter nice and melty. And it is bubbling on the sides, but it's not at a boil. Needs a couple more minutes. Now in this bowl is 20 ounces of dark chocolate chips. Later on, we'll be adding 9 ounces of dark chocolate chips directly to the batter that'll sit inside, and then we'll be pouring 10 ounces of chocolate chips on top. So this recipe has 39 ounces of chocolate in it. 39 ounces in this size pan. It's an intense amount of chocolate. Now, one thing to remember when you're cooking sugar is that sugar, as it heats up, it gets stickier, right? So be careful around this. You don't want to spill this on yourself, because what happens is if you spill it on yourself and then you wipe it, you just essentially smear it. It doesn't come off. So unlike, water or other things that might, brush off if it's warm, your natural reaction to brush this is actually bad. Very often if you're cooking with sugar in a kitchen, you almost always have a little bowl of ice water nearby, so you could dip your hand in there if you get a little bit on there. If you dip your hand in ice water, it'll essentially just turn into a solid, and then you can pluck it off that way. So this is boiling. We are going to take it off the stove. So here comes off the stove. We're going to give it a quick stir, and then I'm just going to pour this directly over my chips. So why do we do this? Well, chocolate is actually very easy to scorch. So if you put it on a stove and you turn it on and you started getting it warm, you can scorch your chocolate. So you always want to be real gentle with your chocolate when you're cooking it. What this does is when I pour the warm liquid in there, it distributes very quickly, but then all that cold chocolate that's in there sucks the heat out of this hot liquid. And so it probably dropped by 40, 50 degrees immediately as soon as it hit the chocolate. This is probably one of the safest ways to melt chocolate. This is how you would make ganache, and this is a great way to do this in this recipe. There's a couple of different ways to melt chocolate other than this. If you need the chocolate without any other additives in it and you need it melted, you can always use what they call a bain-marie. Now that's a water bath, right? So what you would do is you would take a large pot of water and you would put a smaller bowl or pot in it that could touch the water underneath, bring that water to a simmer. It doesn't have that direct heat underneath the flame, so it's a more gentle way to actually cook this. Now, you could also, another popular way is to put it in the microwave. So you take it in a glass bowl, you put it in the microwave, and you put it in the microwave for a little while. Not a long time. Try 30 seconds at a time. Don't go more than that, because it can still scorch in the microwave, right? It can get very hot, and you don't want it to do that. All right, so this is clearly, I waited long enough. It is melted. I'm going to stir it up. So now I underestimated the size of the bowl that I needed to cook this. I still have to whisk in eggs into this, and what I don't want to do is have something so full that it's hard to spin. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move this all from one bowl to the other. But normally most people will just take the smallest bowl in the kitchen and use that. I almost always default to the largest bowl, except for in this case, I sort of underestimated what 20 ounces of chocolate actually looks like. Okay, so to our chocolate, we're going to slowly beat in our eggs. Now, I'm not going to put them all in at one time. I'm going to do them one at a time. And now, if your chocolate is really ripping hot, don't just drop your eggs in there. Wait a minute or two. You know what I mean? You don't want to cook your eggs. You don't want scrambled eggs here. Okay. Almost there. Now, before we pour this into the flour and stir it up, fold it in, what we're going to do is we're going to prepare our pan. Now, if you're going to keep these in the pan, you don't have to paper it. But these freeze real well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put mine in here, and then later I'm going to unpan it. I'll flip it over and unpan it, and then I'll cut it into pieces, and then I'll put them in individual baggies so I can put them in my freezer. They'll last for about 6 months. So I can seed my freezer with little treats for the future, and I don't have to have a whole tray of brownies out wanting to be eaten. I can once in a while go in the freezer, pluck one brownie out or 2 brownies out, depending on how I package them, and then I can just sort of have them as I need them for several months. So if you're not going to unpan it, you're just going to leave it in the pan, just cooking spray or flour, put some butter and a little bit of flour on the bottom. I'm actually going to use cooking spray and parchment though. so I can easily get it out. And I'm going to actually hit this thing pretty hard with this cooking spray because I want it to I want to be able to take it right out of here. And now what I'll do is I'll put it on the bottom like so, and then lay a piece of parchment nice and flat, and then hit the parchment. I know it's a lot of cooking spray, but it helps. It really does help unmolding these. All right. So now we're going to take and add our wet to dry. Now, this does not have to be done in stages. We're just going to pour our wet in right on top of our dry, and we're going to mix it. Now, the clock's ticking because there's a chemical leavener in here, both baking soda and powder. So we want to make sure that we move relatively quickly with this. So I'm going to fold this. I don't want to stir it. I want to fold it. And that's just lifting underneath and letting it fall off of the spatula. I'm folding it because I don't want to build up a ton of gluten in this. All the flour is gone, and it's ready for the additives. To this, we're going to add directly in here 9 ounces of chocolate chips, and I have basically 2 cups or 6.5 ounces of crushed pecans. Pecans in this are outstanding. You can omit the nuts if you want, but I think it adds so much. Now I'm just going to fold this in really quickly. I'm not going to do too much here. Just folding it in a little. Making sure it's distributed throughout. I don't want it to have big clumps of it. I'd like it to be distributed. So I just stir it a couple times. Now, goes into our prepared pan. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to try to flatten it out as best we can. Push it to the edges, right? We're going to give it that signature brownie swoop. See if that stays, right? So this is nicely full. This is a very full pan. This is exactly where you want to be. Okay, on top of this, we have pecan halves. Now this is about, it's like a 3/4 of a cup of pecan halves, or about 3.5 ounces. I'm trying to put them on so that they spread out sort of all over the brownie. Now these are going to roast as they cook, and they'll get a nice roasted flavor. All right. Now, milk chocolate on top. I know some people don't like milk chocolate, but this is really good. 10 ounces of milk chocolate. And we're basically just going to cover the top with milk chocolate chips. This is not a health food. I didn't think I have to say that, but I just want to warn you. Don't make a lot of health food on this channel. The whole top, literally smothered in chocolate chips, pecans. And you can get crazy with this if you want. You can make designs and whatnot. I like the rustic look. All right, this is going to go into a 325 degree still oven or a 300 degree convection oven. All right, this has cooked for 40 minutes. I started checking it at 25 minutes. It was a little jiggly. As you can see right now, it is not jiggling anymore. When I put any toothpick in it, it comes back with crumbs, which is what I want. I don't want it to be wet. So if it comes out wet, it's not ready to go. Wait till it comes out crumbs. Wait till it doesn't jiggle anymore. When you shake it, it's done. Now I know you're going to want to tear into this, right? You're going to want to 100% dig into this right away. Don't do it. Wait, hour and a half, and then cut into it. It's going to get more dense as it cools, and these flavors are going to get a chance to meld. The chocolate's going to taste better when it's cool. Trust me on this. Wait an hour and a half, then dig in. We have waited. This has been almost 2 hours, and it is nice and cool. As you can see, the brownie has sunk down a little bit. Now, I'm going to try to get it completely out of here. You can, of course, like I said, leave it in here, cut it. I have an old serrated steak knife that I use for moments like this, mainly because I don't want to ruin my good knives, right? I want to take a good knife and stick it in here and rub it along the bottom of a pan. I'd much rather use a knife that I don't care that much about. I'm actually going to use this knife to go along the sides of this pan because I'm going to try to remove it and take it all out. And I don't want to do that with a good knife, right? You don't want to take one in good knives and run it along the side of a pan. And really what I'm doing is just trying to get some separation between the brownie and the pan that it baked on for, 45 minutes. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this cutting board and actually, is this cutting board better? Yeah, this one's better. All right, so I'm going to take this cutting board and I'm going to try to flip it out. So here we go. Flip it over. Now, we'll give it some taps here. Look at that. Right, but we're not done yet. We need to get it off of the cutting board and onto a different cutting board. Now, I could easily 100% just do this, cut it right here, but I want to show you what it looks like when I cut it. So I'm flipping it over again, but you don't have to do that. If you wanted to cut it into pieces now, perfectly fine to cut it into pieces now. All right, there we go. And as you can see, it paid off to spray this twice, right? Spray it once and twice, and as you saw, this came off with it. But it really paid off to put a lot of kitchen spray on it. All right, now I could easily switch over to a good knife because I won't hurt anything, but I'm gonna cut it here. Basically working my way to the edge here so you can see what it looks like. Look at that moist, delicious brownie. Look at it falling apart. It's perfectly cooked, right? That's a nice, chewy brownie. You need a minute with these brownies. So good. It's just so full of chocolate flavor. So you bite into it, and inside of it are these little pockets of chocolate, because that's where I put all the chips, right? And then outside, there's also pockets of chocolate, but they're sweeter chocolate. And then you also have pieces of pecan. Again, intense flavors, deep, rich chocolate flavor. Doesn't taste burnt, right? Sometimes you'll get a hold of a brownie and it tastes burnt. The chocolate tastes burnt because they weren't careful with the chocolate. You were careful with the chocolate, so it tastes like good chocolate. It still has a good melting quality to it. The pecans are very rich, and you're also running into pecan pieces inside. It wasn't overmixed, so it also is a little delicate. It's not like dense, it's delicate. And that's, again, another hallmark of these brownies. Well, look, I hope you try these. Really, genuinely, this is one of the best brownie recipes I've ever had, and it's because it's basically a ton of chocolate with a bit of egg and flour and then some additives. Really outstanding, delicious recipe. Hope you give it a chance. I hope you like, share, subscribe, come back, hang out next week. Catch you next time. Season liberally.